DC is often called underrated, and many people might think that statement is exaggerated, especially when other publishers like Dark Horse are. Being less popular does not mean it is underrated. Underrated means the quality or value of something is not properly recognized or appreciated, not that it is unknown or unpopular. Lack of popularity is not the same as being underrated. Something is underrated when its quality is overlooked or undervalued, not simply because it is less well known. Just because something isn't popular doesn't mean it's underrated. Underrated means people fail to recognize its true quality. However, underrated does not mean lacking quality. It means that many people simply do not know DC's characters and stories. The truth is that many of DC's greatest and most masterful characters and narratives are either unknown to the general audience or no longer widely discussed. For decades, DC dominated animation, comic books, and video games long before streaming platforms made these mediums mainstream. Had many of those works been released today, they would likely have become far more popular. Unfortunately, mainstream popularity has always been driven primarily by movies, which is also what most people prefer to stream on the internet. A common claim is that DC has released nothing significant outside of Batman. This belief exists largely because many people do not realize that several iconic and critically acclaimed films are actually adaptations of DC Comics. Movies such as V for Vendetta, Road to Perdition, The Red Duology, A History of Violence, and Watchmen all originate from DC Comics. There are numerous live-action DC adaptations that stand as masterpieces on their own. While some may be weaker when directly compared to their original comic book versions, the same can even be said about the Dark Knight trilogy. As great as those films are, their portrayal of Batman and his world can feel limited or even disappointing when compared to the depth and complexity of Batman in the comics. If this statement itself comes as a surprise, it only further proves how underrated DC truly is, because understanding this requires familiarity with DC comic books. This situation is similar to cases like Netflix's Death Note adaptation or many anime and video game adaptations. People who have never read, watched, or played the original versions often consider these adaptations among the best stories they have experienced. Nostalgia and prior attachment naturally influence opinions. Someone might still love an adaptation even after later discovering that the original was far superior. The same applies to the Dark Knight trilogy. Many people love it deeply, even if it falls short of the comic source material. Another major strength of comic books, especially DC, is accessibility. Unlike manga or anime, where stories are often linear and require starting from chapter 1, DC allows readers to jump in almost anywhere. You can pick up issue number 1 of a particular run or storyline and understand everything you need through context and narrative guidance. This flexibility makes DC far easier to approach than many anime series. While some argue that you can start anime midway, the emotional weight and narrative stakes are rarely the same. For example, imagine starting Death Note only from Nier's introduction. You would miss much of what makes the story powerful. In DC Comics, however, even if a storyline is not as strong as a previous one, it often still delivers impactful ideas and memorable moments. Ultimately, what truly holds DC back is not a lack of quality, but people's hesitation to give it a chance. Long-standing stereotypes, misconceptions, and unfamiliarity prevent many from exploring its vast and rich library of stories. That reluctance, more than anything else, is why DC continues to be underrated. DC has historically focused more on quality than on aggressively marketing its brand, and this approach is a major reason why it is often considered underrated. Ironically, DC's commitment to artistic quality is also what contributed to its decline in mainstream recognition, and in some ways, hurt it over the years. When producing films such as V for Vendetta, A History of Violence, Road to Perdition, and even the Dark Knight trilogy, DC did not prominently display its brand or push its identity onto the audience. Unlike Marvel, which consistently places its logo, shared universe, and brand presence front and center, DC allowed these films to stand on their own. The focus was on storytelling, tone, and craftsmanship, rather than on constantly reminding viewers that the content belonged to DC Comics. As a result, many people do not even realize that these critically acclaimed and beloved films originated from DC. Each of these works felt distinct, self-contained, and creatively independent. In the case of the Dark Knight trilogy, the DC brand was either understated or almost invisible, which is rare compared to Marvel's approach of heavily emphasizing its cinematic identity. You don't usually see the Disney logo emphasized in Marvel films. Instead, the Marvel logo is presented prominently right at the beginning. In contrast, DC often does the opposite, placing less emphasis on its own brand identity. This pattern extends beyond films and into video games as well. Titles such as Batman, Arkham, and The Wolf Among Us do not aggressively promote the DC brand. Instead, the spotlight is placed on the developers, Rocksteady, Telltale Games, and others, even though these games draw heavily from DC's mythology, comic book lore, Batman the Animated Series, and classic Batman comics, much like the Dark Knight trilogy did. Because of this, many audiences have already experienced DC's greatest stories, themes, and characters without ever realizing they came from DC. DC's greatness has been quietly absorbed into popular culture, but its name has often been left out of the conversation. That subtle, quality-first philosophy, while admirable, is one of the key reasons DC remains underrated today.